Hello, everyone. I am just delighted to be here once again with my friend Marcia Clark, whom I have not seen for too long a time. Welcome, Marcia.
Oh, thanks. It's so nice to see you, Barbara. It's been way too long.
Last time we were together was what? Were we with Linda Fairstein? Were we doing a joint event with Linda?
Yes, yes. I think so. And I think we did two events. Didn't we do one for women lawyers and then one at the store with Linda?
We did do a memorable event for the Women's Bar Association when you arrived at the LA airport just in time for a shooter to lock the
Yeah.
airport down. And I spent the whole day at the bar meeting saying, maybe she's coming, and you ended up getting her at like what, 8 o'clock at night?
Yeah, really like, but he was like, I mean, a normal person would have said, never mind. I said, I refuse to let this guy ruin my good time with Barbara. So I'm going no matter what. And so, yeah, I showed up really late. I missed the afternoon thing I was supposed to do, but I did show up in time for you. So,
Yes, you did. And I gave a moving little speech pretending I was you at the bar meeting. I remember that. So, for those of you watching, because I think Paige said, Paige Martin from the Arizona Women's Bar, that some of you would be watching, welcome. And I'm sure some of you remember that rather dramatic day.
yeah,
So,
that
speaking
is
of
true.
dramatic days and so forth, before we start talking about the book, let's talk a little bit about the TV show. I saw that it was canceled, which made me sad. But did you have
Me
fun
too.
doing it for a year?
I did. I did. I had a blast doing it. It was really, I mean, it's a lot of work. A show, a series is no joke, but it was really fun. I was working with some wonderful people. It was just a greatest bunch. I love the cast, and it was terrific. But this happens to so many shows nowadays. One and done. So we just got to get back at it, do it again.
Are you thinking of a different approach and a different show?
Oh, always, always. We're always developing new things, and one unscripted as well as scripted. So we'll just see what hits. That's the way you got to be. You got to keep rolling.
So, in regard to books, one of the things that I've noticed about Final Judgment, which is your new Samantha Brinkman book, is that in interviews you have said you think that you've told her story and you're thinking of doing something else. Is that true?
It's true. It's all true. Let me just encourage everybody to join me with a glass of wine if you're so
Yay.
inclined. Yay! Let's make it a party. Yes. So I'm actually at work right now on a standalone. It was what I meant to do before I started the Samantha Brinkman series. I really wanted to write a standalone. I was determined to do it. And I came up with all different ideas, a juror, maybe a crime victim, maybe. And then I just, nothing really gelled. And then Samantha kind of appeared in front of me saying, what about me? And there I went, And so this time I was like, I'm going to do a standalone. I must do this. It's important to stretch, I think. So it's going to be written from two perspectives. So it'll be first person and third person, two different people alternating. So it'll be a different kind of story and certainly different characters because we need to do different things to challenge ourselves, right?
Well, you really love writing. And for those who've
Yeah.
never heard our infamous original meeting, it was, and I really love this story. It's absolutely true that Marcia's publicist sent me a copy of her first book, and I wanted to do something with it, but I wrote back and I said, I have to have Marcia sign an affidavit she actually wrote this book because too often, it's true, too often celebrities wind up with ghostwriters and so forth, and I wanted to be sure that it was the real Marcia Clark who wrote the book. And you were so
you were the
nice.
one. Yeah, you were the one who burst my bubble because Margaret Truman wrote a series of books, right? And I thought she really did. And then you said, no, she didn't write any. I didn't know that till I met you.
It was, yes, hilariously, I outed her ghostwriter totally by accident at an event. I've never gotten over that either. You wouldn't really think that book selling was going to have as many revelations. It's almost like a trial, where you put somebody on the stand and suddenly, if you're a good lawyer, you're never surprised, but most of the time, in fact, you do wind up being surprised. Over 30 years of doing this, I've just been amazed at the number of things that have popped up that have been so surprising and strangely secretive. That I swore I'd never write a memoir. and reveal all these things. So, since you and I have both laughed over my original request for an affidavit, I don't mind telling that story, but nothing else we've talked about would I ever, not that there's anything to conceal, would I ever reveal. Right?
No.
No. Right.
I don't want to talk to you when you're writing that memoir.
No, I'm really never going to. However, I've been Marie Kondoing my home office, which has like been a trash heap for the last 10 years. And in the process, I have uncovered, this will be interesting for the Poison Pen staff sitting over here to know, almost all of our original newsletters and a trove of photos and all. So it would be kind of interesting maybe to come up with, 30 years is a long time for a small business. It might be interesting to see if we could construct, in fact, a memoir of the business. Not anything to do with me, but just, the story of the Poison Pen, because it's gotten more interesting.
Well, that would be a great story. I think you should do both.
Well, I'll think about it, but no ghostwriter, right? It's going to have to be.
No.
Nope, the real deal.
The real deal.
So, Samantha, final judgment. It felt like time, you said, I read an interview that you did, which I really liked, and I printed it out. Felt like it was time to let Sam have her ultimate victory, and with that victory, it was time to let Sam and me, you said, move on. Yep. So you set this book up for her to score in some really big way?
Yes, she's going to get, yes. I don't want to give any spoilers out, but I had always planned that this would happen eventually, and when I got to this book, I thought, okay, that's enough of Sam and me. I'm not saying I won't go back to her at some point, because I might, because I really like her. She's so fun to write, but I wanted to give her this satisfaction, let her have this. And so, she's real to me, and I think she appreciates what I did. I hope she does.
She should.
But I definitely did want to pay something off for her in this book, and did. But this book, in a way, is very different from the others because it's very, very personal. I mean, Blood Defense was a very personal book in that the person she was representing, she learned was her father, whom she'd never known. But in this book, it's her boyfriend, and for her, this is a big deal. She never had a relationship that lasted more than 2 nights. So this one's been really standing the test of time for her, and she's nervous about that. This is somebody who has big trust issues. She's a very emotionally scarred character. But Nico, who is a world-famous martial arts entrepreneur and expert, has been the one who's won her heart. And in this, there is a company he was investing with that was doing very well called Gold Strike, and he got all his friends and his mother to invest in this company, and then Nico and Sam are on a beach in Bora Bora having a lovely vacation when they get a phone call and find out that these guys who ran Gold Strike Enterprises invested in a Bitcoin trade that wiped everyone out and left his mother destitute, and people are like jumping off buildings. So they ran home, cut their vacation short. He goes and he confronts these 2 guys at Gold Strike because he was the one who got everyone involved. And then very shortly thereafter, one turns up dead and another one is missing. And he is a person of interest, and Sam has to represent him. And what she's most upset about, if you know Sam, because she believes she is judge, jury, and executioner, frequently executioner, when it comes to the system of justice, which she does not trust. She only trusts herself. It's not the fact that he might have killed him that bothers her. What bothers her is he didn't tell her about it. And he kept it to himself. And then she has to confront her own hypocrisy because she doesn't tell him about her extracurricular activities either. So there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of personal involved in this, although there is a lot of action, and of course it's a murder mystery.
Well, there is a lot of action, but you've posed a number of ethical dilemmas. The first thing I thought was fun. So they're both work obsessed, okay? We know that Sam is work obsessed, and any decent criminal lawyer is on call 24/7, regardless of like being, being in the ER or something. And apparently so is he. So here they are, idyllically, in Bora Bora. And she had agreed to go for, I think it was, if they cut it to just 5 days, because she couldn't imagine being gone any longer. So I had the same experience some years ago when my husband took me to the now defunct Kona Village Resort, which was wiped out on the big island of Hawaii by the tsunami. But I was the same way. It's like, I can't really spend any time in Hawaii. I took like a suitcase full of books, and I was willing to stay for I think it was 5 days or something. And I was there for like half an hour, and I looked at Rob and I said, I was so wrong. Can't we stay longer? And I thought of that because Sam comes to that point.
Yeah.
And then cruelly, you have the phone call. And just as she commits to staying longer and, really enjoying her time in the romance, he has to suddenly turn around and go back. And I thought there were so many interesting turns of the screw in that.
Yeah.
So has that ever happened to you, something similar?
I haven't been on vacation in so long, I can't remember. It's been so many years. But honestly, I'm a workaholic for sure. And a couple of friends of mine were talking about going to Maui for a couple of weeks, and I said, 2 weeks? That long? And everybody's looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Yeah, it's torture, 2 weeks in Maui.
Yeah, well, but for people like us, it actually is hard. The only way I can successfully do it is to go on a cruise, and given the state currently of the cruise industry and travel, I may have, done my last cruise, although we're signed up to do round trip New Zealand through Antarctica at the end of the year, but who knows if that will work out. Because you can't really just like get off a cruise ship, even if you're stuck. Yep, you commit and there you are. But otherwise, I really understood it. But what you really have going on here for Sam is you've got two tracks. You've got her personal life and you've got her professional life. But in this story, you actually intertwined them. So the payoff could be neither, or both.
Yes. I mean, they can wind up completely broken up. Of course, she winds up investigating him on the sly, even though she's representing him. But she can't help herself. She's a suspicious, mistrustful person. She wants to find out the truth about him and what is his background, and she winds up finding out too much, and that causes a huge blowout between them. I'm not going to say that.
Don't go any further. I'm just saying.
That's it. But it's very personal that way. There is a lot. You're right. There's a lot of personal stuff going on there.
Right, and since she hasn't had a particularly satisfying personal life, she's been better at her professional life. The reader can try to work out which area the payoff will come from. As I said, either, neither, or both. So I read something. I think you got a terrific starred review in Publishers Weekly for this book, which is always gratifying. And at the end, they said something about this was a great book for readers who like ethical dilemmas and that kind of payoff, similar to Sarah Paretsky, which I thought was flattering, A, and true, B. But also, I wonder, are you a Paretsky reader?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Who's not? I think she's totally wonderful. She was one of my earliest, as I think about it now. I mean, she was one of the first that got me really into the genre that I loved so much, and yeah, definitely.
I still remember, I'm, old enough to have read her in real time as she has written her books, and her new book is out just now with yours. So I found that really interesting, and she's got a whole thing going on in Chicago where I grew up there, so it was always corrupt, in Chicago. If you wanted to get a job, you had to inherit it in many of the unions. And my own father, who was like a picture of integrity, he was one of the most honest people I knew. When I first got my driver's license, I actually got a ticket in downtown Chicago. I think it was a parking ticket, and my father fixed it. I couldn't believe it. I was so shocked. I was like, what? So, it's interesting the things that we will do despite our own moral codes for people we love.
Oh, yeah. I get it.
Right?
It's just a traffic ticket. It's okay.
I'm not sure what the message was I drew from it. I was only 16 and so morally unfit at that point anyway. But I still remember that he did that. So, anything else you want to say about Sam in this book?
Let's see. So yeah, Sam in this book actually gets called on her shit a lot.
Okay.
by her Mishi, who's her paralegal best friend since they were in junior high, and a little bit by her investigator, super hacker Alex, who's a former client of hers, who got busted for stealing BMWs from the dealership where he worked by via computer, so he could sell them and use the money to support his family. And she winds up representing him and then hires him, and he's been with her throughout the series. And they both Alex and Mishy kind of faults him on her hypocrisy, and that she feels like she can't trust Nico because what if he did kill these guys and he's not upfront with her about it and he's lying to her about it, and they're like, and you that now she's kept it from them, that she does not let them know about her extracurricular work, but they have an idea that something goes on with her, and they know she's not being entirely upfront with him because that's what she is. She doesn't. So there's a constant push and pull going on between her and Nico, as well as between her and her best friend and Alex, her investigator, who's also a best friend, really. And then the action in terms of the people involved that she talks to, the people involved in the investment business, are a really interesting mix that she, as usual, there's plenty of social commentary in it about people in general and some in specific. And I guess I can't say much more without, getting into spoilers. It's always so hard to balance that.
I know it. I often wish that I could do these kinds of conversations like 6 months after the book published, and then we could talk. We did that in February. We had a book that was, the entire point of the book was the end. I mean, you read all the way through the book, and the payoff came in like the last 3 pages. And
Wow.
I talked to the author, and so we did a book event where you had to have read the book to come. That was the deal. Unfortunately, she came here like a month after publication, and so it wasn't unreasonable to ask people, to have read it. So it was sort of a combination book club and an author event, and it was just great because people then could give their opinions about how it came out, and how successfully she had pulled the wool over everybody's eyes in order to get to the surprise ending. And it was a really rewarding thing to do. But most author conversations come when the book first publishes to get people interested.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's because that's a great idea, and that's the thing I would love to do, is to be able to sit down and talk to you, talk to the readers, and say, so what did you think of this? Where did this take you? And how did you feel about that? And you can't.
Well, here's the good news. Now that we've all learned this new Zoom technology, and it's not, it's not that hard, but at the same time, we're not totally comfortable with it. I think we could do stuff like that because, you don't have to be physically here in order to talk about, like when the paperback publishes or something. And I see opportunities now to have conversations with authors that a very wide fan base who are not necessarily geographically present could enjoy. And I think we could schedule some. We're actually scheduled a writer's workshop on Zoom tomorrow night with Reese Bowen, who stepped up and offered to teach one. And I think if that works out, and there's security issues with Zoom, so you really want to do this by invitation. I mean, right now you and I and Patrick over here are the only 3 people in this meeting, and then the Zoom is on Facebook, so you don't wind up with Zoom bombing. And to do a workshop or a small group, you're perfectly safe. But as I understand it, if you have an open Zoom meeting, then unpleasant things can happen.
Yeah, that is the problem. I mean, you're doing it the right way so that it's safe and secure. And the Zoom bombing thing can be a really bad deal. We're having a nice conversation and somebody jumps in. So yeah, this is the way to do it for sure. And as long as people figure this out, it can be a wonderful tool because actually it's extremely easy. It's very user friendly, and it looks good. It's pretty simple and it's also comfortable. Which in many ways, in my opinion, it's more comfortable than Skype ever was. Which Skype always felt a little bit too herky jerky. The picture wasn't great. There was a delay. That's hard.
I agree. I think that there are some great opportunities. In fact, just as you said that, I was sitting here thinking, I wonder if you could have brought in an expert witness in the courtroom on Zoom, or if that might be the future of some trials. What do you think?
Yeah, it could be because as long as you can see the person's face and the jury can see them, and then the right to confront and cross-examine witnesses is not abridged. I mean, I can see where that there could be rulings that say, that is okay, and we do a variety of things. Like there is such a thing as a conditional exam when someone is like in dire straits and is in the hospital and can't come in. The attorneys will go to the hospital room and videotape and then play it. I mean, these things can be done.
I know it can. I was the plaintiff in a very large medical malpractice case in 1981, which I won
Yeah.
as the plaintiff. But the video, the expert, the medical expert witness testimony was all brought in on video because the trial was back in the eastern part of the country, and I had the doctors who treated me were here in Scottsdale at Mayo Clinic, and so they allowed them to testify by video, which back then, that was a long time ago, 40 years ago,
Mhm.
was a really
Yeah.
interesting thing. But today I was thinking, just watching you, how easy that would be, to zoom them in. Plus you don't really even have an identity question, because it's perfectly clear who you are,
Yeah, who it is.
which makes it even more reliable. Okay, you guys, lawyers watching this, here we go into a whole new world. Um, what was I saying? What were we talking about before that? I've lost my train of thought. I got sidetracked.
I did too.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we were talking about the opportunities to use Zoom to maybe do post-publication discussions when people have
I
had a
think that'd be
chance.
fun.
I think
Yeah.
it would be too. But the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was, when you set up a series character like Sam, you have to give them some kind of an interesting backstory. You pick a point in time, a stage in their life, professionally, an age, a place. You create all that. You think it up, and then there you are. And to make it work, you really wind up having to leak in parts of that story as you move the plot forward, so that people get to know Sam. Part of her backstory is that she had an abusive stepfather, but yet she's not a super Me Too kind of person. So
No.
why did you give her that particular kind of childhood, and that helps shape the person she is in this book in particular?
Yeah. So it was a weird thing, Barbara, when she came to me. I mean, it really was one of these weird. She just appeared in my head. I could see what qualities she had. Very smart, very guarded, mistrustful, suspicious, scarred emotionally, but tough as nails. And I like to say a little bit on the spectrum, if you will. I don't think she suffers a lot of conscience pains about what she does, and neither does her father. I think they have that in common, who is an LAPD detective, and they wind up working together at 16, and especially they do in Final Judgment as well. But it's it was because of the way I saw her when she first came to me. I thought, well, what would have happened to a person to make them like this? She doesn't really have any boyfriends. She has one best friend from junior high when she was going through the worst time, living with her mother's boyfriend, who was a billionaire and a pedophile. These things came at just kind of felt logically like this is what would happen if someone who was very smart and eventually got lucky to have her mother finally find a nice guy who helped her pull out of the spiraling she was doing in drugs and booze in high school, and then give her the ability to get into law school and be a lawyer. But somebody with the qualities that I saw her initially would have had this kind of really horrifying background, would have had a background that made her mistrust law enforcement, not believe in the justice system. I mean, when she was a kid and the housekeeper saw what was going on with the boyfriend, she called the cops, and the boyfriend, rich and powerful, bought him off. Basically, I'm a good guy, I'll be with him, whatever. Sam sees this, and it scars her for life. So she has no regard for cops. So it was a matter of seeing who the character appeared to be, and it was up to me to figure out how did she get there? How would that happen? What would be in this person's background to make them this way? So it's kind of like tracing her backwards. She came to me in present time, and then I had to figure out how she got to where she is.
Absolutely. But the other part of that question is, how do you decide how much of that backstory to tell us and when? You can't suddenly be like in chapter 4 and go on pause and then recite the story of her previous life. So,
Yeah.
how do you learn to judge when you should leak in bits and bits of the backstory? And do you do it over? If you're a standalone, you have to do it in one book, right? I mean, that's where you are. But if you're going to write a series, and you can see like at least 3 novels out of it, then you have to also decide how much per book. because again, you don't want to give it all away in book one and save nothing up for book two.
Yeah, in the first book in the series, there's just various points in the story when something impacts the character, and she says, I know how that feels because, or that really pisses me off because, and that so you see it in that way as the character's reacting to present time events. But you do give a lot of the backstory in the first book, but there's going to be new wrinkles that happen over time and from book to book. I didn't tell you about this. There's this, so there's always a little bit of something new that you get from the background. But yeah, it has to key in from points that are in present time, as we do, as one really does. I mean, how do you remember what's happened to you in your life? Well, because something's happening right now that makes you go, oh, I remember that happened to me. Or, oh, I know I hate that because, that kind of thing.
You mean just like I told the story about my father fixing my traffic ticket in Chicago?
Yeah, a little bit.
That's true.
Exactly right.
I actually hadn't thought about that for probably 25 years, and then suddenly there it was. Yeah, I mean, you're right. We're all a composite, of our experience, and as you say, present events elicit memories. But, pacing is so important to a successful story, to a successful narrative, and is it something that you learn as you go, or is it just by feel? I mean, how do you arrive at those moments when this is the time to bring up a memory?
I mean, I get notes. I get notes from my agent. I get notes from my editors. I get, they teach me, and then eventually I learn. Because the one thing you want to make sure is that you don't stop. As we say in TV, you don't want to stop the fun train. So you don't want to come to a big stall where you go this big block of exposition about my past life. That's not interesting. You want to keep it tight. So, over time, with experience, getting notes from people who are much wiser than me, you get to have a feel for when to throw it in and how much to throw in at a time. Because you just, and part of it really is when you read it yourself, you can see that the flow has stopped. The flow of the writing, the flow of the action has stopped. Then you've done too much. And then it's time to pull it out and find another place for whatever else you want to say about the character, or the character should be telling the reader
about. Well, excuse me, I think you made a point that I argue often, is that books are collaborative. I mean, I'm talking to you, you're the god of the universe here for Sam that you have created. But I think the best books really emerge from a collaborative process. And I have occasionally run into authors who claim that they are never edited or don't need editing. And only one of them, Ruth Rendell, was I ever actually willing to consider that might be a reasonable statement. But she had written, I don't even remember how many dozens of books by then. And so maybe she could get away with it. But it seems to me that authors who resist a collaboration, resist notes, as you say, probably do no favors to themselves or to their story. It's hard to
100%.
see your own. Yeah, it's hard to see your own mistakes. Right?
Oh my God! They're the forest for the trees issue, because you're in the weeds. You get more and more deep into the book, and you can't see the big picture. And then you just can't see what you can't see. I mean, there comes a point. No matter how many times I try to edit myself and turn in as clean a copy as I can, there's stuff that I miss. There's stuff I've skimmed over. There's stuff that, I should have fixed. And then I get notes from my agent or my editor, and I look at it and go, what was I dreaming? Was I high? Wait, maybe.
Where's the line? Yep, there we are. Well, the real truth is that half the time it's there's too much, but the other part is that there's stuff that that you fail to write down. And so sometimes it's the omissions that are the problem, not the overwriting, and that's why I say a collaborative. I always think of myself when I edit a book as the first reader, and my compelling argument to my authors is that I'm a really good reader, so if I don't get this, most people won't.
That's absolutely key. That's so important. I've found so many times, I've written and I think it's very clear. I think I've explained it all, and they go, I don't get this. What's this about? And then I stand back and I look and I go, truly, I don't know.
Or it was in my head, but I forgot to write it down.
I forgot to put it down. I mean, this is invaluable. And of course, in writing for television, it's enormously collaborative. You have a writer's room, you beat up stories together, and then you get notes from the production company, notes from the studio, notes from the network. I mean, it's an endless process. but I find it very helpful. And in writing books, I cannot imagine, not imagine for 1 second, not getting notes from my editors, from my agent. I mean, I would be terrified to put out a book without. Oh,
A safety net,
definitely.
right?
I mean,
So,
that's the experience of having read so many, gotten so many notes that I look back and I reread and I think, what was I dreaming? So, yeah.
there we are. Let me just check with Patrick to see if anybody has asked a question. Patrick?
Yeah. Um, let's see. Marcia, can you hear me?
Barely.
Okay. The question is, she says, what a career you've had, lawyer, author, etc. Anything you'd like to do that you haven't done?
Ooh, what a good question.
It's a really good question. No, I just want to do more of it. I really like doing behind the camera work, producing television shows, and I'm producing. I'd like to do another reality show. I'd like to be behind the camera to produce it rather than be a host. But I like to do more of that. It's really fun. I think maybe a podcast. I did a podcast that was a companion piece to my show on A&E, the first 48 most notorious. Um, and that was a really fun show to do. And doing the podcast was fun. I wouldn't mind doing another podcast. And of course, writing more books. I guess just more.
Do you know, we've gone through this whole thing and we have never actually given your show a name in case anybody's missed it. What is the show?
Which was the ABC show?
Yeah,
The Fix.
The Fix.
The Fix. You can still find it, I'm sure. You know, they have this stuff in various places. And the other show that I hosted, Marcia Clark Investigates the First 48, that's now on DirecTV's channel. So you can find it there if you have DirecTV. And what they did that was really smart is I did the show, I taped all the shows, and then separately I did a companion podcast that was to air when each show aired. But now what they did was they cut in pieces of the podcast into the show. So it's really kind of smart. I wish I thought of that. So if anybody's interested, these are about very famous cases you've heard of, I'm sure, like Robert Blake, Casey Anthony, Jan Master J, those kind of things. All of those are big cases, and we found different information, things that I didn't know. I thought I covered these, I followed these cases pretty closely. I learned things I didn't know. So it's really, it's a fun show.
It's pretty hard if you are located in Southern California to not in part measure yourself in your work by television or the movies or or the platform. Let me just say, a film platform versus a print platform.
It's just so prevalent here. It's just it's kind of it's the especially Los Angeles company town, and so much of it is taken up with television in particular, but film too. It's everywhere.
Well,
but not much right now.
No, true, but it is. On the other hand, there also is just seemingly an unending wealth of odd, dangerous, unusual, whatever incidents, information. I mean, you've got like a constant wellspring of things to draw upon that maybe are not so prevalent in Wisconsin or whatever. So I think it's sort of a double. They reinforce each other. That here's where stories are. And then here's a way to tell them, and then maybe in fact some stories are impelled by the fact that people want to be famous. They want some kind of recognition.
That's true.
Patrick, anything else?
Yeah, there are a couple of good ones.
Okay.
Let's see. Is there a historical court case that captures your attention that you wish you could defend or prosecute, and why?
Wow.
A case in history that I wish I could prosecute or defend. I'm sure there are many. Gosh, that's a great question. That's a question I need to think about that one, because there are there's just so many of them.
Well, kind of
I'm sorry.
That's
I'm stumped. I'm stumped.
As a corollary to that question, have you ever been tempted to do a true crime book based on one of the cases that you've discovered, or anything like that?
I have thought many times about writing a true crime book. And it's a question of having the time to research, because to do something like that, you have to be able to meet with people, sit down with people, do interviews, do archive searches. I mean, there's a lot that goes into doing a good true crime book. But I have thought about it more than once. And one of these days, I do hope I'm going to get the time to vote that I can devote to doing it and do it right. You know, there's plenty of crimes that are fascinating that I would really love to look into. So, but you know, you also have to have willing subjects. That's the other hard part. You know, there were cases we wanted to do for my show on A&E that we couldn't do because we didn't have access. Because if the cops don't want to talk to you, or some part, you know, you have to have a party involved that's way inside the case who will talk to you and give you the access that you need, and that doesn't always happen.
No, I can see that it wouldn't. You know, and the other part of that is for every book you write, there's a book you didn't write. And
Yeah,
you know, if
at least one.
yep. So well, in a true crime book, probably two, because they do take more time. So, you know, if fiction is what you really love, then that's a big step out, and you know, a novel or two you'll never write.
Yeah, you know what? That's 100%. It's opportunity cost as well. Because if I'm spending a year working on the investigation of a case and I'm going to write a true crime book about, I'm not able to write a novel at the same time. Just, you know, you can't. There's only so many plates you can keep spinning.
And maybe for you, who spent so much of your life in the weeds and true crime and all, maybe making it up is more rewarding for you right now.
Yes, I mean, yes, that's absolutely true. I mean, I think it was Publishers Weekly when I first put out my first book, put that coined the phrase, Clark turns to fiction to control the outcome.
That is truly a great line. It's a great line. Wow. Anything else, Patrick?
It's also true.
Yes. Nicole Kent says, I don't have a question, but can you tell Marcia she's my hero? I think that's great.
That's so sweet. Thank you, Nicole. I am not worthy.
And how about this one? Which series was the most rewarding to write, Rachel Knight or Samantha Brinkman?
See, yes, like choosing between your children. I really enjoyed them both. I have to say, but it's a different experience. Rachel Knight was a chance for me to revisit my time in the DA's office in the Special Trials Unit before Simpson, when there were no cameras, no hoopla. It was just me and the detectives and the evidence and other prosecutors that I could have drinks with. And, you know, just really loved the mission of that job. It was much more than just a career. And so that was a chance to relive those years. But then Samantha, I was a defense attorney before I was a prosecutor. And I became a defense attorney after I left the DA's office as well, doing criminal appeals for the indigent. So that part of me was like, I really wanted to explore the defense side and also have the freedom to swing for the fences the way a defense attorney can, because a prosecutor can only do so much. You know, they really do have to abide by the law. They can't break into houses. They can't, you know, go and throttle people to get the information, or else it'll be thrown out. The evidence, it won't come to court. So they have to do it right, and they have to be fair, and they have to treat a defendant fairly, make sure the charges are fair, and sentencing's fair, and the trial's fair. Defense attorney doesn't have to do any of that. They can just, all they have to do is represent their client to the best of their ability, and that means they have a lot of latitude, and that's why it was so much fun writing Samantha, because I had that latitude to let her be a wild character, like I said, judge, jury, and executioner, when she saw fit. So they each have their pluses and their minuses in terms of the funness of writing them, and I can't choose. But one of my friends has said, John Valerian is saying, I think you should have a crossover and have them oppose each other in court. I thought that would be really special.
Would be. I think I'm remembering this right, but although he's not a lawyer, Michael Connolly, as you know, does write a character, Mickey, who he calls the Lincoln lawyer, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, Patrick can correct me, that while he's a freewheeling defense attorney, at one point in one of the books, Patrick, he tries to work for the prosecution and discovers just what you said, that, you know, the role of a prosecutor didn't suit him at all. He was way better acclimated in all respects to working the defense.
Yeah.
So not really uncommon.
Yeah, I get that.
Well, obviously, because you just said it. Well, I have loved visiting with you. I think our time is up. Is there anything you'd like to say before we wave goodbye to all your fans?
Oh, no, it's just nice to see you and nice to see all the fans and everybody. I hope you enjoyed Final Judgment, guys. Barbara, thank you so much for having me. It's always such a pleasure.
It is a great pleasure. And I may, for those of you watching this, Marcia and I may pursue this idea of reassembling sometime later in the year and talking about how Samantha's life comes out in final judgment. So stay tuned. Meantime, thank you very much for joining us.